Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Area Sales Manager Bryan Regennitter and Joe Bahe are on location in Stanley, Iowa. It's an action-packed episode from weather patterns to planting conditions to local farming practices and more. We hope planting season is going well for you this year.
Hi, this is Joe. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Lynn, and Turk. And Lynn, you're going to do the introduction today. We have a special guest.
Yeah, so to continue on with our area sales managers, we have Bryan Regennitter here today. And Bryan, you have a guest, so if you want to introduce yourself and your sales area and your guest, and let the viewers know what's going on.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, guys. I am Area 4, which is northeast Iowa. I'm here with a dealer in Stanley, Iowa, which is just east of Oline, Joe Bahe.
Good morning.
And brought Joe Bahe on this morning because he's doing some non-traditional things with his farming practices, and thought they were interesting, and took some chances this year on some wheat with us. So first time he's ever grown wheat, and the first time I've had wheat this far north. So
let's talk about that just a little bit, Joe. What made you want to plant wheat? How many acres did you plant, and how's that wheat looking right now?
I started out with 80 acres. Cover crops have been planted around here for 10 years. And I was always frustrated because you'd plant them after corn. They'd get you might not even see them germinate in the fall. In the spring, they'd get about 3 inches tall, and everybody wanted to terminate them right away. For the soil health attributes, I couldn't see how that was doing a whole lot of good. Where wheat, I know that it's got better soil health characteristics. And I've been following you guys long enough to know that you have some earlier maturing wheat. So I thought I might as well give it a try on some of my lower organic matter soils. And I'm hoping to double crop it to where I can harvest it in June and then get some Saturns in there before the 4th of July. So
what was your planting date? How early did you get that wheat planted, and what were you doing? Were you chasing soybeans with it, I assume?
Actually, we went in after corn. I planted 100-day corn, and then we double drilled it. We drilled it at 2 different directions. I think we did it around the 3rd week of October, about as soon as we could get in there and do it. So everything this year seemed to be delayed. I wanted to get the corn harvested in September, and it ended up getting pushed back just due to the fungicides and the slower dry down in the corn.
Gotcha. So what do you plan on doing with that wheat? I imagine you're probably a couple good solid 3 or 4 weeks into green up. Have you got your nitrogen on? You got planning on doing anything fun with fertility with it?
No, I'm looking for some advice. Bryan and I are going to go out and take a look at it when we're done here. I am seeing the tillering. A week ago, I couldn't pick up any tillering, but now it's starting to grow. So I think we're at that stage where I'm hoping, if he thinks it's a viable stand and it's worth doing, I'm hoping to put nitrogen over the top of it next week.
Awesome. You guys are in a little bit different part of the world than we are. Heat hasn't been necessarily your friend, I guess. So let's just talk about that a little bit. How has this spring been for you guys, and what's the weather conditions like currently?
We were cold and wet up till about a week ago. Last Tuesday through Friday, we had highs in the 70s and 80s. So the ground was really about in perfect condition. So a few guys planted corn. I planted some beans last week. And then throughout the weekend on Monday, we had 3 inches of snow and 30-mile-an-hour winds. The schools were closed. My wife was stuck in the driveway. So it's been a wild week. Now we've kind of moderated in that 50-degree highs the last couple of days. And that's the way the forecast looks for the next week. But through the rain we had last 2 days, we've only had about 4/10. So I feel fortunate there. So I think without any more rain, I feel there's a potential to where we can start planting again next week.
Gotcha. Well, that's good news. Bryan sent us some good pictures of some nice sprouted soybeans, and they have some snow in the background behind them. And we got 2 different pictures there that we can overlay, showing the progress from, I believe, last Monday and yesterday of the beans sprouted and looking healthy and ready for some warmer temperatures to pop out of the ground.
Yeah.
So Bryan mentioned it a little bit earlier when he was doing your introduction. What maturity beans are you planting, and what kind of excites you for this coming year?
I like to do everything 2 or less. I really like the 1.2 to 1.5. I have this goal. It never always happens, but I'd like to be done combining beans by October 1st, so I can tear into the corn. I like combining 25% corn. There is phantom yield loss. I've seen it. Sometimes 30 bushel difference between 25% and 18% corn. So I hope to be able to switch over then. But it doesn't always happen. Especially, I do like to do some 2.0s, and those usually fall in about the first week of October. But it seems like in Northeast Iowa, once you get into the 1st of October, the weather pattern changes to where we have more rain. It cools down, and I was telling Brian, between September 15th and October 15th, you lose a day and a half of daylight up here. So it just makes you more productive.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
And this isn't your first year being a Merschman Seeds dealer. You've got a couple years under your belt with us now.
Yeah.
What are some of the yields that you've seen on what would probably be a half a maturity to 3/4 of a maturity earlier step than probably what your neighbors are planting?
Yeah, I was telling Brian just now, I had some of the new Saturns last year, and they went 78 bushel over a whole farm. So I don't think there's a whole lot of yield parity in the early maturities versus the more full season stuff. I think at times there will be years where the 2.2s, 2.5s, 2.8s will yield more, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure there's those situations where it could happen, but it hasn't happened for me, and I'm happy with the way it's going.
You think planting date has a lot to do with that?
I found a planting date, planting earlier may not always enhance yield, but I found it never hurts yield.
You guys have had a couple pretty decent springs the past 3 years, haven't you? Where you're able to sneak beans in pretty early. So, I mean, does that help when you're planting a 1.2 and most people are planting a 2.2?
Yeah, I would say it does. Giving it a little extra time to mature, I think that does help. I find it's nice because we usually have dry conditions before we have warm conditions. So usually my practice is to start planting beans till the ground gets to be 50 degrees for corn. Then I'll stop, switch over, then I'll go back and finish up with the beans. And also I prefer starting out with beans because they're a little more forgiving with the planter. So if you're starting out that first day or two with the planter, you're not messing with starter. It's more forgiving if you don't have the depth set just right and you're still tweaking on the planter.
Gotcha.
I think that's exactly what we've seen down here. You and I have looked at over the past 4 or 5 years. I think 1 year since I've been at Merschman's, the early planted beans yielded no less than what the later planted beans, but then the other 4 years there was a 5 to 7 bushel advantage. So I think you're exactly right. What you're seeing up there is that you're not hurting your downside potential, but on the good years you're definitely maximizing your upside potential on your soybeans.
Well, I think maybe Joe can speak on this. Maybe I think the emphasis in the industry was never about early maturing soybeans until more recently. I think we've done a better job of genetic improvement in the past years than we did before that. So,
yeah, there doesn't seem to be a penalty like you were talking about for the early beans, but it's really the workload that you have to manage. And you're exactly right about how, boy, when that calendar turns over to October, it seems like the days really shorten up. And if you're a soybean harvester, you miss that extra daylight. So farmers have to get things done on a timely basis, and planting those earlier beans early, you can still maximize your yield and utilize that sunlight in September. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, another thing that we've been doing is 5 years ago, I probably planted at 160,000. Then we went down to 140. Last year was 120. This year was 100,000. And I was telling Brian, when I was digging up seeds the other day, I'm in 20-inch rows, and every plant was 3.5 inches apart. And it's kind of unusual to see them that far apart, but I think that's the right way to go. I've seen yields get better with lower populations versus the raising of the population.
And I think they're part of that too. I mean, you're talking about the genetic diversity and what we're looking at. A lot of our beans have more of a bush style tendency to them. There are a lot fewer inline beans, more narrow type beans than what we've had in the past before my time even paying attention. But we have a lot of 2.5 style out of a 1 to 3 scale. We have a lot of 2.5s that have a tendency to branch more, which is conducive to these lower planting populations for what they're pushing there.
And we're also continuing to improve our seed treatments, and so we can get a higher percentage out of the ground. So you're doing the right thing. As much as we love to sell you seed, we're more focused on your yield, because at the end of the day, that's what will help us sell more seed if you get the yield. So that's the name of the game. So you're doing the right thing, and populations, I would say in general, are coming down. We have one local farmer here only plants 80,000 plants per acre, and if he doesn't get 80 bushel, he's not happy. So, and that's a true story, and he's just been slowly moving his population down. Of course, he's got the latest equipment for planters and equipment that puts everything in perfectly. He's a very, very meticulous farmer. So, if you're doing all those things, bring your population down, save some money, and maintain that yield. And again, we have good traits now for your weed control. And when you do lower your population, you have to pay attention to your weed control, because sunlight's never wasted. Something's going to grow there. So I agree with you. You're doing the right thing, and continue to tweak your population.
So I'm really excited about the Trinemco. I was telling Bryan that's what we had some pattern ag sampling done last fall, winter, and I was surprised at the nematode population. So I'm looking forward to see how it does. Just about every bag I sold, it's got the starting line plus on it.
Yeah, it's good for the Trinemco. I mean, to be able to see some positive.
Start managing it.
We're in a corn, so most of my neighbors are on a corn soybean rotation around here, so it's becoming an increasing problem. Yeah,
they always say the first thing you have to do to solve a problem is to identify it. You've identified it. Now you've taken some things to solve it. And of course, in a dry year is when you're going to see a greater return on that Trinemco than in a wet year, because nematodes cause more problems, in a dry year than they do in wet years. So I think it's a general trend in our entire marketing area is that farmers are starting to address nematodes, and we are too. We're trying to come out with more Peking type varieties too, to change up the mode of resistance, so tolerance. So definitely something that everybody should be looking at.
So on that nematode side, was that something before you did pattern ag that was even on your radar? Did you really think it was an issue, or is it something that kind of was an aha? I need to look into that a little bit more.
I was seeing spots. You could see the sudden death was coming up, and I'm assuming that sudden death was part of it, but I think there was probably an underlying factor, and I was assuming the nematodes was the bigger issue, and the test concluded that it was. So, yeah.
On the theme of pests, do you, as we talk to our northern guys, we run into some white mold. Is white mold a problem that you've run into, or is that something that that isn't that big of a deal in your area?
I haven't seen white mold in probably 3 years. I think part of it's due to lowering populations, but I'm just not seeing it like it was 10 years ago. I'm assuming it's got to be due to better inherent genetics, but maybe it's management. I don't know, but it has not been a problem for us.
Good. Well, we'll have the bases covered with the heads up and the starting line, and the Trinemco for your soybean cyst nematode problems as well. So I'm really excited for both of those products, and you guys being able to test those and see how we measure up against the competition, because I think it's honestly going to give us a leg up, whether it's a bushel or two here or there, or in high instances, heavy pressure instances, you're looking at 4, 5, 6 bushel advantage, which is huge.
And this is our first year with hundreds of thousands of acres of this new seed treatment out. So we're going to see differences this year, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to basically distancing ourselves from the competition and what they're using.
So Joe, you'd mentioned that you're in a corn-soybean rotation. Has that changed over the last few years from a corn-corn soybean to just a corn soybean, and why?
We're no-till 100%. So to keep storage at a kind of a static level of what we need, we've been 50-50 rotation for a long time.
Okay.
So you guys are also in Northeast Iowa. What does the corn rootworm situation look like for you guys? It's kind of been a hotbed for that and tar spot. If you want to hit on either one of those, I'd be curious to see what your pressure for either one of those is like.
The rootworm is probably worse. You start going about 10 miles east of us, that's where you have more livestock, and that's where they're doing intensive 10, 15, 20 years of corn on corn, and that's a real problem over there. For the growers around here, it has not been that big of an issue. We've got a lot of good farmers around here that are using insecticide as well as traded seeds. So they've been getting by, and they know in this immediate area, they know when to switch out. But it is a bigger problem. Tar spot was horrible around here. I think the first lesions I found was on July 12th last year. So we were infected late June, and I had an 80-acre field where I sprayed a third of it once, a third of it twice, and a third of it not at all. And there's a 70 bushel spread between what I didn't spray at all and what I sprayed twice. So the yields were ho-hum last year. They were okay, but the way everything looked in June before the tar spot moved in, you would have thought we had 300 bushel corn. So it hurt. But I know you don't have to go too far south, west, north to where the tar spot wasn't an issue. So just in this immediate vicinity, it hit us really hard. Every year it seems to be a different place that gets hit hard, and it was Southern Fayette County this last year.
So what is your plan, knowing that you have the inoculum, knowing that, the inoculum both comes from the soil and is wind-borne, what are you planning to do this year to combat that? I mean, are you making any management changes?
I've got enough fungicide bought to cover everything twice. I'm hoping to make sure to hit everything at that VT R1 stage, and then sit and wait and see whether we need it. I like to get it on then, but if we don't need a second pass, I don't want to do it because the corn moisture went up about 7 points. I like to plant 112, 114 day corn up in this area, but I tell you what, when you start having that end up be 30, 32% corn at the end of October, that's a management challenge on getting it dried down. So I have scaled back some of my maturities in the corn this year to try to combat that, but I'm hoping that some other place this year takes the brunt of the tar spot, not us again.
What is your preferred application method when you're running that?
We've been going with a Hagee over the top.
Do you feel like you're getting better control because you are using a ground rig?
I don't know. I've had a Hagee, but we're in 20-inch rows, so driving down the rows is really, really tough. So previous years, I've hired it done with an airplane, and I thought it had satisfactory results. Some of it this year we did with an airplane, and I couldn't see any difference in yield.
Gotcha. Always good questions, because guys have lots of different opinions, and it's always fun to tease out those questions, because some guys really do believe that the ground rig's the right way to go when the inoculum load is so high, just because you get the coverage deeper down into the canopy. But no, that's really, really good to know. So you want to spread out just a little bit wider, Bryan. You cover a little bit bigger area than just Stanley, Iowa. What is the conditions? You run in southern Minnesota all the way down to essentially Interstate 80. What are the conditions like in your area, and who started, who hasn't, and what's everything look like?
Things are slow. My recommendation for the most part, people that were really getting geared up is let's wait till this cold spell with the moisture kind of goes through. That's never ideal, trying to have germination with cold moisture. However, I do have several people that did, and Joe is obviously one of them. It's always a crapshoot. You can't ever guess right or wrong. You're just trying to manage the risks. But I would say I have less than 5% that have put seed in the ground in my area. Conditions-wise, we have pretty decent moisture right now in our area. And I know west of here they don't, but right here we look pretty good. Soil temperatures got up to the 60s there for a while, high 60s. They've cooled back down to the mid or 50 to the upper 40s now, depending on where you're at. But yeah, so we're looking good. I think Joe's right. I think with the amount of moisture we got, or the lack thereof, the amount of moisture we got, I think a lot of people will start turning wheels again next week.
Good.
I think next week's going to be a big, big week, north, south, east, west. If there's a window there, folks are getting really, really antsy, and we're getting to where, we're maybe one weather event away from having some delayed planning in some situations. So I think some guys want to take the bird in hand and maybe gamble a little bit and move on and be done. So,
Joe, you have something sitting in front of you that you may want to touch on here that I think both of these guys on the other end of the screen have familiarity to.
Yeah, this week in the Progressive Farmer, and we'll put the link up for you to read the actual article yourself, but there's several groups that have come forward that want the Dicamba registration pulled, and it just seems like it's an ongoing saga with Dicamba, and so this, quite frankly, they want a complete registration pulled so that it cannot be used as a post product or anything to do with soybeans and cotton. So that there's also, of course, some lawsuits that are pending that could be coming in. So there is quite a bit of momentum still against Dicamba. And keep in mind, the president of Bahe is a new president now, and we understand that he's very focused on the risk that Dicamba exhibits to their company. So be prepared for this coming year after we spray our Dicamba that there may be some changes in the future. We don't know, but it's just something that's on our radar. And it should be in the back of every farmer's mind that is currently using the technology, that there could be additional changes coming. But we'll put the article up. You can draw your own conclusions. Just wanted to make everybody aware that the saga continues with Dicamba.
Right, and I guess the reason, and either one of you can take a stance on this or have a comment on it on the other end. Some people have painted the picture that it's a southern problem, it's a cotton problem. I've walked fields up in counties that are adjacent to where you guys are at. It's not necessarily a southern problem. You guys have seen what this widespread atmospheric loading can do, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think the EPA did make an improvement where the cutoff was the 20th. In 2022, though, the problem was the window between June 15th and June 20th. It was hot, it was dry, it was windy. So we had atmospheric loading was worse. The weed control for the guys that did spray the Dicamba was not great. And I had guys that would come back in off label and clean up mid-July with Dicamba. And that's what really hurt. I could tolerate it if I was getting hit, middle of June before the reproductive phase. But when we started getting into mid-July, when they were really starting to get some height to them, and all of a sudden they stalled out for 3 weeks, that's what really frustrates me. And I'm hearing from people that are in the Dicamba camp that they're going to do the same thing again. So that's, if people would abide by the June 20th, I could probably tolerate it. But when I know they're going to use that as their backup to go back and clean up with Dicamba again, I have some real reservations on whether it should be used in the future. And I hate to be that way. My area, I'm in a big seed corn area, so the Dicamba products are used a lot up here. So it's frustrating, and I think they're frustrated with it too. But I haven't been able to get the market share of Enlist beans in my area like most other dealers are, just because of the prevalence of seed corn here.
Well, the other thing that comes into play that is not really talked about too much is that on the vegetable crops that are out there, there is no tolerance for Dicamba on parts per million on that vegetable crop, except for asparagus. So that's where these groups are coming from. They're saying, hey, this Dicamba is drifting around, it's getting on vegetables, and right now there's no EPA tolerance for even 1 part per billion. So that's what the scary part is. And I think this is all finally going to come to a head this summer. So we'll see if my prediction's right.
Yeah, I agree. The extension agronomist I talked to last year, he said that he was, the complaints weren't coming from the farmers. It was the people wondering why their gardens were cupped up, and it was it was the rural residential people that were doing more complaining and questioning than the farmers. So everybody's being affected by it, just not the non-Dicamba soybean producers.
Perfect. Anything else you guys like to cover? I mean, this has been a great interview so far.
I'm going to be having questions next week of whether to plant or not. The forecast is supposed to be dry, decent temperatures, but they're still saying lows around 30, highs around 50. So that's going to give you a mid 40s soil temperature. What do you recommend?
So my recommendation has typically been we have to have 36 hours for a 7 a.m. soil temp to be around 45. The later in the year I get, the more I'll have a tendency to risk it. But 45 to 50 degrees at 7 a.m. in the morning, and you want that to happen 36 hours before that will drop below that temperature rating. So the first drink of water with soybeans, it happens the first 12 hours. With corn, it's 24 to 48. So I draw a 36-hour line that extends past that period to buy us a little extra time. But when people have asked, is it an average temperature for the day that Iowa State reports? Is it the 7 a.m. temp? I have a tendency to go to the 7 a.m. temp because that's your most reserved way to look at it that direction. 36 hours buys you a little extra time. And I really like to be in that 45, and you guys are more comfortable in the north planting cooler conditions, but that's kind of my range and the things I'm thinking about. And then what does the 2-week outlook look like? Do we have a lot of moisture coming in, and are we going to get some growing degree accumulation? Because soybeans can sit in the ground for 3 weeks and they will take advantage of every incremental growing degree unit that they get without being hurt. With corn, I have a tendency to be a little bit more reserved because a corn plant that may be 2.5 inches in the ground here and his neighbor is at 2 inches, they are receiving different growing degree units because the temperature fluctuation changes in that soil pretty drastically. So if that corn plant's sitting in the ground for 3 weeks and this guy over here is taking more growing degree units, he's going to pop out of the ground faster, and this guy on the left-hand side is going to be coming out of the ground slower, and it's going to be back into that. We want to have all the plants emerge 24 hours within that same window. So that's why I'm pretty bullish on planting soybeans when things are a little bit less conducive than planting corn, just because of what that does there. Because when the soybeans do pop out of the ground, they'll take advantage of being planted earlier. Corn, you have more opportunity for you have more risk in the concept that you're going to have late emergers and weeds coming out from that standpoint. We're going to make you hang around for the corny joke at the end here, but I wanted to make a comment. If any of our growers or viewers on the opposite side have pictures of planting progress and digging up their soybeans and want to share those with us, like it, share it, put it on our social media so that we can see what you guys are doing, and if you have any questions about what's going on out in the field. So all that stuff helps by getting pictures to us. We know what's going on out there, and then we can share the good customer experiences that we're having all the way across the board. So,
and bonus points if you can include a thermometer.
There you go. That's what we like. So, Joe?
Well, I don't know if you know this or not, but if you're living next to the Mississippi River, the river is rising. So I was down by the river the other night checking out how high the river was, and I accidentally drove my car into the river. I wasn't paying attention, and I watched it turn into a mobile phone. You believe that? So basically what happened was 1 minute it's a Kia, the next minute it's a Nokia.
You got me. I didn't know where that was going there for a second.
All right, I got one more. Now, we all love our bar jokes here, So 2 bacteria walk into a bar. The bartender says, "Sorry, we don't serve bacteria here." And the bacteria replied, No, we work here. We're staff.
Nice. You worked hard this week.
Maybe I'll get a comeback next week. I don't know. Well, anyhow, we thank our special guest today, and we appreciate everybody getting into planters and getting ready to go, because we've worked really hard this fall to produce some high quality, and all winter long to produce some high quality seed. We are caught up on shipments, so if you need more seed, we are literally got like firemen here waiting for a fire. We're waiting to go out there and deliver some seed to you if you need more. So if you run out, run a little short, we are ready to roll. So we'll see you next week. Hope you're in the field. Take care. Adios.